The rain started falling just as 12-year-old David stepped out of Peterson's grocery store. He pulled his thin jacket tighter and picked up his pace. Tuesday evenings were always the same routine. School until 3, work at the store until 6, then the 20-minute walk home to his grandmother's apartment. David didn't mind the work. The $5 he earned each day helped buy groceries and kept the lights on. Plus, Mr. Peterson was kind to him, always making sure he did his homework during slow periods and never complained when David had to miss work for school events. As David walked along Highway 85, the rain began coming down harder. He was thinking about the math test he had tomorrow when something caught his eye. A shiny black car sat on the shoulder of the road, its hazard lights blinking in the growing darkness. Steam was rising from under the hood, and David could see someone standing beside it. Most kids would have walked right past. His grandmother always told him to mind his own business and never talk to strangers. But something made David slow down. Maybe it was the way the person was standing there, looking completely lost. Or maybe it was because David knew what it felt like to need help and have nobody around. The man standing by the car was older, probably around 60, wearing an expensive-looking suit that was now getting soaked in the rain. His silver hair was perfectly styled, or at least it had been before the weather got to it. He was holding a cell phone up in the air, moving it around like he was trying to catch a signal. "Excuse me," David called out, walking closer. "Do you need some help?" The man turned around and David could see the surprise on his face. Here was this kid soaked to the bone offering to help a complete stranger. The man looked David up and down, taking in his worn sneakers, his jacket with the small hole in the elbow, and his grocery store name tag that read, "David, team member." "Oh, hello there," the man said. His voice was deep and smooth, the kind of voice you'd hear on TV commercials. "I'm having some car trouble. My tire went flat about 10 minutes ago and I can't seem to get any cell service out here." David looked at the car. It was the kind of vehicle he'd only seen in magazines, all sleek lines and chrome. The kind of car that probably cost more than his grandmother made in 5 years. But right now it wasn't going anywhere. "I can help you change it," David offered. "Do you have a spare tire?" The man, who introduced himself as Mr. Richardson, looked skeptical. "Son, I appreciate the offer, but this is a complicated piece of machinery. I'm not even sure where the spare tire is located," David smiled. "Most cars keep them in the trunk. Mind if I take a look?" Mr. Richardson hesitated for a moment, then shrugged. What did he have to lose? He pressed a button on his key fob and the trunk popped open. David walked around to the back of the car and immediately spotted what he was looking for. "Here it is," he said, pointing to a compartment in the trunk floor. "And here are all the tools you need." For the next few minutes, David methodically pulled out the spare tire, the jack and the tire iron. He moved with the confidence of someone who had done this many times before. Mr. Richardson watched in amazement as this 12-year-old boy organized everything with the precision of a professional mechanic. "How? Do you know so much about cars?" Mr. Richardson asked. "My Uncle Tony owns a garage on the east side of town," David explained as he positioned the jack under the car. "I've been helping him out on weekends since I was 8. He taught me that every person should know how to change a tire, check their oil, and jump a dead battery." As David began loosening the lug nuts, Mr. Richardson found himself genuinely impressed. This wasn't just a kid who knew his way around cars. This was someone who understood the importance of being prepared and self-reliant. The rain continued to fall, but David didn't seem to mind. His jacket was completely soaked through, and his school clothes were getting muddy from kneeling on the wet ground. But he worked steadily, talking Mr. Richardson through each step of the process. "The key is to loosen the nuts before you jack up the car," David explained, using his full body weight to turn the tire iron. "Once the wheel is off the ground, it'll just spin around and you won't be able to get the nuts off." Mr. Richardson nodded, making mental notes. He had owned expensive cars for 30 years and had never changed a tire in his life. He always called for roadside assistance or had his driver handle these situations. But watching David work, he realized he had been missing out on something important: the satisfaction of solving a problem with your own hands. "There we go," David said, as he successfully loosened the last lug nut. "Now we jack it up." The car rose slowly as David pumped the jack handle. Soon the flat tire was completely off the ground. David spun off the loosened nuts and carefully pulled the tire toward him. Wow, this thing is really flat, he observed, examining the tire. Looks like you ran over something sharp. See this cut right here? That's what caused the leak. Mr. Richardson leaned in to look where David was pointing. Sure enough, there was a clean slice in the rubber, probably from a piece of glass or metal on the road. Getting the spare tire onto the car required some effort. David had to lift the full-size tire, which was almost as tall as he was, and line it up perfectly with the bolts. Mr. Richardson offered to help, but David had already figured out a technique. I just have to get one bolt started. Then I can spin the tire to line up the rest, David said, grunting slightly as he held the tire in position. Uncle Tony taught me this trick. Sure enough, once David got the first bolt threaded, the rest fell into place easily. He spun each nut on by hand, then lowered the car back to the ground before tightening them with the tire iron. You always want to tighten them in a star pattern, David explained, moving from one nut to the one directly across from it. That way the wheel sits evenly on the hub. 20 minutes after they started, the job was done. Mr. Richardson's car was back on the road, with a properly mounted spare tire that looked like it had been installed by a professional. David gathered up the tools and the flat tire, loading everything back into the trunk. His clothes were muddy and soaked, but he was smiling with the satisfaction of a job well done. Son, I can't thank you enough, Mr. Richardson said, reaching for his wallet. How much do I owe you for this? David held up his hands. You don't owe me anything, sir. I was just happy to help. Mr. Richardson paused, his wallet halfway out of his jacket pocket. Are you sure? You just saved me hours of waiting for a tow truck. I'm sure, David replied. My grandmother always says that when you can help somebody, you should help them. Doesn't matter who they are or what they look like. We're all just people trying to get home. Mr. Richardson stared at this remarkable young man for a long moment. In his 62 years, he had met thousands of people. Business associates, employees, competitors, politicians. But he couldn't remember the last time someone had helped him without expecting anything in return. What's your name, son? He asked. David Chen, the boy replied. I go to Roosevelt Middle School just down the road. Well, David Chen, Mr. Richardson said, extending his hand for a shake. You've restored my faith in people today. Thank you, David shook his hand firmly. You're welcome, Mr. Richardson. Drive safe and don't forget to get that tire fixed soon. Spare tires aren't meant to be driven on for too long. As Mr. Richardson got back into his warm, dry car, David waved goodbye and continued his walk home. The rain was still falling, and David still had 6 blocks to go. But somehow he didn't mind getting wet anymore. Mr. Richardson sat in his car for a moment, watching David disappear into the darkness. Then he pulled out a small notebook from his glove compartment and wrote down everything he could remember. David Chen, Roosevelt Middle School, works at Peterson's grocery store. He had a feeling this wouldn't be the last time he thought about the young man who had stopped to help a stranger on a rainy Tuesday evening. While David worked on the tire, Mr. Richardson found himself genuinely curious about this remarkable young man. The rain continued to fall steadily, creating a strange sense of privacy around them on the busy highway. Cars rushed past, their headlights cutting through the darkness, but nobody else stopped. So, David, Mr. Richardson said, trying to make conversation while the boy worked. Tell me about yourself. Do you help out at your uncle's garage often? David looked up from where he was positioning the jack, raindrops running down his face. Every Saturday morning when I don't have to work at the store. Uncle Tony says learning about cars is important, even if I want to be an engineer someday. An engineer? Mr. Richardson raised his eyebrows. What kind of engineering interests you? Civil engineering, David replied without hesitation as he began pumping the jack handle. I want to build bridges and roads. Uncle Tony always says that engineers are the people who figure out how to make impossible things possible. Mr. Richardson watched as the car slowly rose off the ground. There was something about the way David spoke about his future, not like a child with a fantasy, but like someone who had given it serious thought. That's a challenging field, Mr. Richardson observed. Are you good at math and science? David grinned despite being soaked to the bone. I love math. It's like solving puzzles, you know? Every problem has a solution, you just have to figure out the right steps to get there. As David began removing the lug nuts, Mr. Richardson found himself asking more questions. There was something about this kid that intrigued him. Maybe it was the confidence with which he worked or the mature way he spoke, but more likely it was the simple fact that David had stopped to help without being asked. Do you live nearby? Mr. Richardson asked. About a mile down the road, David said, wrestling with a particularly stubborn lug nut. I live with my grandmother in the Maple Grove apartments. It's just the two of us. Something in David's tone made Mr. Richardson pause. Just you and your grandmother? David was quiet for a moment, focusing on removing the flat tire. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady but softer than before. My mom passed away 2 years ago, cancer. My dad, well, he left when I was little. So it's been me and Grandma Rose ever since. Mr. Richardson felt a pang in his chest. Here was this kid, dealing with loss and hardship that would crush many adults, and he was out in the rain helping a complete stranger. I'm sorry for your loss, David. That must have been very difficult. Thanks, David said simply. He hefted the spare tire, which was nearly as tall as he was. Mom always said that hard times don't last, but strong people do. Grandma Rose reminds me of that whenever things get tough. As David struggled to align the spare tire with the bolts, Mr. Richardson stepped forward. Here, let me help you with that. I got it, David said, his face red with effort. Just need to get the angle right. There we go. Mr. Richardson watched in amazement as David got the first bolt started, then spun the tire to line up the others. Your uncle really did teach you well. Uncle Tony says there's no substitute for knowing how to work with your hands, David replied, threading on the lug nuts. He dropped out of school when he was 16 to help support his family, but he's one of the smartest people I know. He can diagnose engine problems just by listening to how a car sounds. What does your grandmother do for work? Mr. Richardson asked. David's expression grew a bit more serious. She works at the hospital during the day in the cafeteria, and she cleans offices at night 3 times a week. She's always telling me that education is the most important thing, that I need to study hard so I don't have to work as hard as she does. Mr. Richardson felt another twinge. This woman was working 2 jobs to support her grandson, and here was David, contributing by working at the grocery store and still maintaining his focus on school. She sounds like a wise woman. She's the best, David said with genuine warmth. She makes sure I do my homework every night, even when she's exhausted from work. And she never misses any of my school events, no matter how tired she is. As David began lowering the car back down, Mr. Richardson found himself thinking about his own childhood. He had grown up with every advantage: private schools, tutors, summer camps. His parents had provided everything he needed and more. Yet here was David with so much less, and somehow he seemed more grounded and mature than many adults Mr. Richardson knew. What's your favorite subject in school? Mr. Richardson asked. Besides math, I really like history, David said, tightening the lug nuts in the star pattern he had mentioned, especially learning about how people built things in the past. Like the Brooklyn Bridge. Did you know it took 14 years to build? And the engineer who designed it died before it was finished, so his son had to take over the project? Mr. Richardson was impressed by David's knowledge. How do you know so much about the Brooklyn Bridge? I read about it in the library. I spend a lot of time there after school when I'm not working. It's quiet, and they have really good books about engineering and construction. David moved to the next lug nut, putting his full weight behind the tire iron. The librarian, Mrs. Patterson, always saves interesting books for me. She says curiosity is the most important quality a person can have. Sounds like you're surrounded by wise adults, Mr. Richardson observed. Yeah, I'm pretty lucky that way, David agreed. Even though we don't have much money, there are lots of people who care about me and want to help me succeed. As David finished tightening the last lug nut, Mr. Richardson realized something profound was happening. This wasn't just a simple roadside assistance situation. This was a window into a different world, a world where people looked out for each other, where hard work and character mattered more than wealth or status. What do you do for fun, David? Mr. Richardson asked as the boy gathered up the tools. David thought for a moment. I like building things. Grandma Rose got me a set of building blocks for Christmas 2 years ago, and I still use them. I try to design different kinds of bridges and see if they'll hold weight. He paused, looking a bit embarrassed. I know it sounds kind of childish for someone my age. Not at all, Mr. Richardson said quickly. Some of the best engineers I know started exactly the same way. There's a famous architect named Frank Gehry who still makes models of his buildings using simple materials. David's eyes lit up. Really, that's so cool. I'd love to see some of his work. I'll tell you what, Mr. Richardson said, making a mental note. Next time you're at the library, Ask Mrs. Patterson to help you find books about modern architecture. I think you'd find it fascinating." David loaded the flat tire and tools back into the trunk, then slammed it shut. "There you go, Mr. Richardson, you're all set. Just remember what I said about getting this tire fixed soon." Mr. Richardson looked at his watch. The entire process had taken less than 30 minutes, but somehow it felt like much longer. Not because he was impatient, but because the conversation had been so engaging. When was the last time he had talked to someone who was so genuinely enthusiastic about learning and helping others? "David, can I ask you something?" Mr. Richardson said. "Sure. Why did you stop to help me?" Most people would have just walked right past. David wiped his muddy hands on his already dirty jacket and thought for a moment. "I guess? Well, my mom used to say that we're all connected, you know? Like, maybe the help I give you today means that someone will help Grandma Rose tomorrow when she needs it. Or maybe it just means that there's a little more kindness in the world." He paused, looking down at his wet sneakers. "And honestly, I know what it's like to need help. When Mom was sick, so many people did things for us. Neighbors brought food. Teachers gave me extra time on assignments. Mr. Peterson let me work flexible hours. I can't pay all those people back, but I can help other people when they need it." Mr. Richardson felt something shift inside his chest. This 12-year-old boy had just articulated something that many adults never learned. That kindness creates more kindness. That helping others is how we honor the help we've received. "That's a beautiful way to look at life, David," Mr. Richardson said quietly. David shrugged. "It's just how Grandma Rose raised me. She always says that money and stuff can be taken away, but the kind of person you are, that stays with you forever." As Mr. Richardson reached for his wallet one more time, David held up his hand again. "I meant what I said, Mr. Richardson. I don't want any money. Just promise me you'll help someone else someday when they need it." Mr. Richardson looked at this extraordinary young man and made a decision that would change both their lives. But first, he had some investigating to do. He needed to learn more about David Chen and the remarkable woman who was raising him. "I promise, David," Mr. Richardson said, and he meant it. "Thank you for everything." As David walked away into the rain, Mr. Richardson sat in his car for several minutes, writing down everything he could remember about their conversation. David Chen wasn't just a good kid who knew how to change a tire. He was someone special, the kind of person the world needed more of. Mr. Richardson had built his fortune by recognizing opportunity and potential. And sitting there in the rain, he realized he had just met the greatest opportunity of his life. The next morning, Mr. Richardson sat in his corner office on the 42nd floor of downtown's tallest building. Usually, he would be reviewing quarterly reports or preparing for board meetings. Instead, he found himself staring out at the city below, thinking about a 12-year-old boy who had changed his tire in the rain. William Richardson had built Richardson Industries from nothing. 30 years ago, he had started with a small construction company and a big dream. Now his company built skyscrapers, bridges, and highways across 3 states. He employed over 2,000 people and was worth more than he could spend in several lifetimes. But yesterday, standing on the side of Highway 85, he had felt something he hadn't experienced in years. He had felt genuinely helped by someone who wanted nothing in return. It had shaken something loose inside him, something he thought he had lost years ago. His assistant, Helen, knocked on the door. "Mr. Richardson? Your 10 o'clock is here." "Cancel it," he said without turning around. "Actually, cancel everything for today. I need you to do some research for me." Helen looked surprised. In 15 years of working for Mr. Richardson, she had never known him to cancel meetings without an emergency. "What kind of research, sir?" Mr. Richardson turned around and pulled out the small notebook where he had written David's information. "I need you to find out everything you can about a student named David Chen. He attends Roosevelt Middle School. Also, look into a woman named Rose Chen. I believe she's his grandmother. And see what you can learn about Peterson's grocery store on Highway 85. "Is this for a potential business deal?" Helen asked, making notes. "Something like that," Mr. Richardson replied. "But Helen, I need you to be very discreet about this. Don't contact any of these people directly. Just find out what you can through public records and maybe some careful phone calls." After Helen left, Mr. Richardson found himself unable to concentrate on anything else. He kept thinking about David's mature way of speaking, his genuine desire to help others, and his dreams of becoming an engineer. But most of all, He thought about what David had said about kindness creating more kindness. 2 hours later, Helen returned with a file. "This is what I was able to find," she said, setting a folder on his desk. "The boy is quite remarkable, Mr. Richardson." Mr. Richardson opened the file and began reading. David Chen, age 12, honor roll student at Roosevelt Middle School. Maintained a 3.9 GPA despite working part-time. Member of the math club and volunteer tutor for younger students. Teachers consistently described him as mature beyond his years and always willing to help classmates. The information about Rose Chen was equally impressive. 68 years old, had worked at City General Hospital for 12 years. No disciplinary actions. Consistently received excellent performance reviews. Neighbors described her as the kind of person who would give you the shirt off her back, and always the first to help when someone is in trouble. But it was the personal information that really caught Mr. Richardson's attention. David's mother, Linda Chen, had died of cancer at age 34. Medical bills had wiped out the family's savings. Rose Chen had taken custody of David and moved from her senior apartment to a larger unit in a less expensive complex so David could have his own room. Mr. Richardson learned that Rose worked 60 hours a week between her 2 jobs to make ends meet. David's after-school job at Peterson's grocery was helping to pay for school supplies and clothes. Despite their financial struggles, David had never missed a day of school and was involved in several volunteer activities. "There's more," Helen said. "I spoke with the principal at Roosevelt Middle School. She was very careful about what she could tell me officially, but she made it clear that David is one of the most exceptional students they've ever had. Academically gifted, but more importantly, he has what she called remarkable character." Mr. Richardson closed the file and leaned back in his chair. Everything he had learned confirmed what he had sensed yesterday evening. David Chen wasn't just a good kid, he was extraordinary, and he was being raised by a woman who, despite having very little, was instilling values that many wealthy parents failed to teach their children. "Helen, what do you know about educational scholarships?" Mr. Richardson asked. "Scholarships, sir? Are you thinking about establishing one through the company?" "Maybe," Mr. Richardson said thoughtfully. "What would it take to provide full educational support for a student? Not just college, but everything. Middle school, high school, college, maybe even graduate school if they wanted it?" Helen pulled out her phone and made some notes. "I can research that for you. Are we talking about tuition only, or comprehensive support including books, supplies, living expenses?" "Everything," Mr. Richardson said firmly. "I want to know what it would cost to remove every financial barrier between a deserving student and their educational goals." As Helen left to research scholarship options, Mr. Richardson found himself thinking about his own son, Michael. Michael had had every advantage. The best private schools, unlimited tutoring, enrichment programs, exotic vacations. But somewhere along the way, Michael had lost his sense of purpose. He was now 28, working in a job his father had arranged for him, and seemed to drift through life without passion or direction. Mr. Richardson wondered what would have happened if Michael had been raised with David's sense of responsibility and gratitude. What if instead of being given everything, Michael had learned the satisfaction of earning things through hard work and helping others? That afternoon, Mr. Richardson did something he hadn't done in years. He left the office early and drove out to Peterson's grocery store. He parked across the street and waited. He wasn't sure why, but he needed to see David again to confirm that yesterday had been real. At 6:15, David emerged from the store, waving goodbye to someone inside. He was carrying his backpack and wearing the same thin jacket from yesterday, now clean but still showing the small hole in the elbow. Mr. Richardson watched as David began walking down Highway 85, the same route where they had met. On impulse, Mr. Richardson started his car and slowly drove alongside David, rolling down his window. "David, hello again." David looked over, surprised but smiling. "Oh, hi, Mr. Richardson. How's your car running?" "Perfect, thanks to you," Mr. Richardson replied, keeping pace with David's walking speed. "Listen, can I give you a ride home? It looks like it might rain again." David glanced at the cloudy sky, then shook his head. "That's really nice of you, but I like walking. Gives me time to think about stuff." "What kind of stuff?" Mr. Richardson asked, genuinely curious. "Oh, you know, school projects, things I learned during the day. Today I was thinking about this bridge design I saw in a book. I'm trying to figure out how the engineers calculated the weight distribution." Mr. Richardson smiled. Even after a full day of school and work, David was thinking about engineering. "David, can I ask you something? What do you want to do after you graduate from high school?" David's face lit up. "I want to go to State University. They have one of the best civil engineering programs in the country. I've been reading about their professors and the kind of projects their students work on. It's incredible. Have you looked into the costs?" Mr. Richardson asked gently. David's expression grew more serious. "Yeah, I know it's expensive, but I'm going to work really hard to get scholarships, and I'll keep working part-time to help pay for it. Grandma Rose says that if I want something badly enough and I'm willing to work for it, there's always a way to make it happen." Mr. Richardson felt that familiar tug in his chest. Here was a kid who understood that success required effort, who appreciated the value of education, and who had clear goals for his future. Everything that money couldn't buy, David already possessed. "Well, I'm sure you'll find a way," Mr. Richardson said. "You're pretty remarkable, David." David looked embarrassed. "I'm just trying to make my mom proud, you know, and take care of Grandma Rose the way she's taken care of me." After David disappeared into his apartment complex, Mr. Richardson sat in his car for a long time. He thought about all the charitable donations he had made over the years. Checks written to organizations he barely knew anything about, tax-deductible contributions that his accountant recommended. None of those donations had ever felt personal or meaningful, but this was different. This wasn't about tax benefits or public recognition. This was about recognizing extraordinary potential in someone who might not otherwise have the opportunity to develop it fully. That evening, Mr. Richardson called his lawyer. "Jim, I want to set up a private scholarship fund, something completely confidential, with very specific terms and conditions." "What kind of terms?" his lawyer asked. "The recipient must maintain excellent grades, demonstrate strong character, and commit to helping other young people once they achieve success. I want this to be about more than just academic achievement. I want it to recognize the kind of person who stops to help a stranger, even when they have problems of their own." Over the next 2 weeks, Mr. Richardson had his team carefully investigate every aspect of David's background. He spoke with teachers, neighbors, and community members. Every conversation confirmed the same thing. David, Chen was exactly the kind of young person who deserved unlimited opportunity. Mr. Richardson also learned more about Rose Chen. Despite working 2 jobs and raising her grandson, she volunteered at a local food bank on Sunday mornings. She had never asked anyone for help, even when times were toughest. Several neighbors mentioned that she was always the first to offer assistance when others were in need. The more Mr. Richardson learned, the more convinced he became that this wasn't just about helping one deserving student. This was about investing in the kind of person who would make the world better, who would use their success to lift up others. On a Friday afternoon, exactly 3 weeks after their roadside encounter, Mr. Richardson made his final decision. He was going to change David Chen's life. But more than that, he suspected David was going to change his life too. He had Helen contact Roosevelt Middle School to arrange a meeting. It was time to make David an offer that would transform not just his future, but the future of everyone he would someday help. 3 weeks had passed since the rainy evening on Highway 85, and David had almost forgotten about the well-dressed man whose tire he had changed. Almost, but not quite. Something about Mr. Richardson had stayed with him. The way the man had listened so carefully to everything David said, the genuine interest in his eyes when David talked about his dreams of becoming an engineer. It was a Thursday afternoon when Mrs. Martinez, the school secretary, called David to the principal's office over the intercom. David's stomach dropped. He had never been called to the principal's office before, and he couldn't think of anything he might have done wrong. "Don't look so worried," Mrs. Martinez said with a smile when David arrived at the office. "You're not in trouble. Principal Jackson wants to see you about something good." Principal Jackson was waiting in her office along with someone David didn't expect to see, his grandmother, Rose Chen. She was wearing her best dress, the navy blue one she usually saved for church, and she looked nervous. "Grandma, what are you doing here?" David asked, confused. "Is everything okay?" "Sit down, honey," Rose said gently. "There's someone here who wants to talk to us." That's when David noticed the third person in the room. A man in an expensive suit with silver hair and kind eyes. It took David a moment to recognize him without the rain and the broken-down car. "Mr. Richardson?" David said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" Mr. Richardson smiled and stood up to shake David's hand. Hello, David. I hope you don't mind me tracking you down. I have something I'd like to discuss with you and your grandmother. Principal Jackson gestured for everyone to sit. David, Mr. Richardson came to see me yesterday with a very unusual request. I think you should hear what he has to say. Mr. Richardson opened a leather portfolio and pulled out some papers. David, 3 weeks ago, you helped me when I was stranded on the highway. You refused to accept any payment, and you told me something I haven't been able to forget. You said that we're all connected, and that helping others is how we honor the help we've received. David nodded, still confused about why this conversation was happening in the principal's office. I've spent the last 3 weeks learning about you, Mr. Richardson continued. Your grades, your character, your goals, your family situation. I hope you'll forgive me for being so thorough, but I needed to be absolutely certain about something. Rose Chen reached over and took David's hand. She looked like she might cry. David, Mr. Richardson said, I believe you are exactly the kind of young person who deserves every possible opportunity to succeed, and I believe that investing in your success will make the world a better place. He handed David a folder. I would like to offer you a full educational scholarship. Complete funding for the remainder of your middle school, all of high school, 4 years of college at any university you choose, and graduate school if you decide to pursue it. David opened the folder and saw official-looking documents with his name on them. The numbers were so large he couldn't quite process them. I don't understand. Why would you do this for me? Mr. Richardson leaned forward. Because 3 weeks ago a young man stopped in the rain to help a stranger. Not because he had to, not because someone was watching, but because it was the right thing to do. That young man showed me something I had forgotten, that the most important things in life can't be bought or sold. They can only be lived. Rose Chen's eyes filled with tears. Mr. Richardson, this is incredibly generous, but we can't possibly accept something like this. It's too much. Mrs. Chen, Mr. Richardson said gently, with all due respect, this scholarship isn't charity. It's an investment. I'm investing in someone who I believe will use his education to help others, to build things that matter, to make the world better. The return on this investment won't be measured in dollars. It will be measured in all the lives David will improve throughout his career. Principal Jackson spoke up. David, I've reviewed the scholarship terms with your grandmother and with the district's legal team. This is completely legitimate. Mr. Richardson has established a private foundation specifically for this purpose. David looked at the papers again, then at his grandmother, then at Mr. Richardson. But I haven't even applied to college yet. How do you know I'll get accepted anywhere? Mr. Richardson smiled. David, with your grades and your character, you'll be accepted anywhere you want to go. The question isn't whether you'll succeed. It's how much you'll be able to accomplish when financial barriers are removed from your path. There are conditions, of course, Mr. Richardson continued. You must maintain your excellent grades. You must continue to demonstrate the same character and integrity you've shown so far. And there's one more requirement that's very important to me. David waited, his heart pounding. Once you've achieved success, whether that's graduating from college, starting your career, or building your own company someday, I want you to find ways to help other young people the way I'm helping you today. This scholarship comes with the responsibility to pass along opportunity to others who deserve it, but might not otherwise receive it. David looked at his grandmother, who was openly crying now. Grandma, what do you think? Rose wiped her eyes with a tissue Principal Jackson had handed her. Honey, I think your mama would be so proud right now. She always said you were destined for great things. I need to ask, David said, looking directly at Mr. Richardson. Why me? There must be thousands of kids who need help with college. Mr. Richardson was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. David, I've been successful in business for 30 years. I've met thousands of people, worked with some of the smartest minds in the country. But in all that time, I've rarely met someone who combines intelligence, character, and genuine care for others the way you do. He paused, looking out the window. I also have a son, David. He's 28 years old and he's had every advantage I could give him. But somewhere along the way, he lost his sense of purpose. He doesn't understand what it means to work for something, or to help others without expecting anything in return. You, at 12 years old, understand things that he may never learn. This scholarship isn't just about helping you, Mr. Richardson continued. It's about investing in the kind of person who will use their success responsibly, Someone who will remember what it was like to need help, and who will make sure others receive the same kind of opportunities. David thought about everything Mr. Richardson had said. He thought about all the nights his grandmother had fallen asleep at the kitchen table, exhausted from working 2 jobs. He thought about the engineering books he browsed at the library, dreaming of projects he might someday work on. He thought about his mother's words. Hard times don't last, but strong people do. "If I accept this," David said slowly, "I promise I'll work harder than I've ever worked before. And I promise that when I'm successful, I'll help other kids the way you're helping me." Mr. Richardson extended his hand. "Then we have a deal, David Chen." As David shook Mr. Richardson's hand, he felt like his whole world was changing. A month ago, college had seemed like a distant dream, something he would have to struggle and sacrifice to achieve. Now suddenly every door was opening. But even more than the financial support, David felt something else. He felt like someone believed in him completely. Someone had looked at his life and his character and decided he was worth investing in. That feeling was more valuable than any amount of money. "There's one more thing," Mr. Richardson said, pulling out another folder. "I know your grandmother has been working very hard to support both of you. The scholarship fund includes a provision for family support as well. Mrs. Chen, if you're willing, I'd like to offer you a different kind of job." Rose looked surprised. "What kind of job?" "I need someone to help coordinate the foundation's activities. Someone who understands what families like yours go through. Someone who can help identify other young people who deserve these opportunities. The position would pay well enough that you could quit your night job and have more time to spend with David." Rose Chen covered her face with her hands and cried. 40 years of struggling, of working multiple jobs, of worrying about how to provide for her family. And suddenly, everything was changing. David stood up and hugged his grandmother. "It's going to be okay, Grandma. We're going to be okay." Principal Jackson, who had been quiet during most of the conversation, spoke up. "David, I've been an educator for 25 years and I've never seen anything like this. You should be very proud and I'm grateful," David said simply. "And I'm going to make sure I deserve this opportunity." Mr. Richardson gathered up his papers and stood to leave. "David, Mrs. Chen, I want you to take some time to think about all of this. My assistant Helen will contact you next week to begin the paperwork process. And David, I hope you'll stay in touch with me as you progress through school. I'd like to hear about your projects and your dreams." After Mr. Richardson left, David and his grandmother sat in Principal Jackson's office for a few more minutes, trying to process what had just happened. "Grandma," David said finally, "do you think Mom would be proud?" Rose Chen pulled her grandson close. "Honey, I think your mama sent that man to you on that rainy night. She's been watching over us all along." As they walked home together that afternoon, David felt something he had never experienced before. For the first time in his life, he could focus completely on his dreams without worrying about how to pay for them. The future, which had always seemed like such a struggle, now felt full of unlimited possibility. But more than that, David felt a deep sense of responsibility. Someone had believed in him enough to change his entire life. Now it was up to him to prove that belief was justified, and to make sure that someday he could do the same thing for someone else. 5 years had passed since that life-changing afternoon in Principal Jai. Keekson's office and David Chen stood at the podium in the university's largest auditorium, looking out at hundreds of faces. As valedictorian of State University's engineering program, he had been chosen to deliver the commencement address to the graduating class. In the third row, Mr. Richardson sat beaming with pride. Over the past 5 years, their relationship had evolved from benefactor and recipient to something much deeper, a genuine friendship built on mutual respect and shared values. Mr. Richardson had attended David's high school graduation, celebrated his acceptance to State University, and checked in regularly throughout his college years. "Fellow graduates," David began, his voice clear and confident. 5 years ago, I stood in a very different place. I was a kid from a struggling family with big dreams but limited resources to achieve them. Today I stand here because someone believed in the power of education and the importance of investing in people, not just for what they are, but for what they could become. David had exceeded even Mr. Richardson's high expectations. He had graduated summa cum laude with a degree in civil engineering, completed internships with top firms, and already had job offers from companies across the country. But more importantly, he had maintained the character and values that had first impressed Mr. Richardson on that rainy evening. During his sophomore year, David had started a tutoring program for underprivileged middle school students. What began as weekend sessions in the library had grown into a formal nonprofit organization called Building Bridges, a name that reflected both David's engineering focus and his belief in connecting people across different backgrounds. Education is not just about acquiring knowledge, David continued in his speech. It's about developing the ability to see problems and create solutions. It's about understanding that our success is meaningless unless we use it to lift others up alongside us. In the audience, Rose Chen dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. At 73, she looked younger and more relaxed than she had in years. True to his word, Mr. Richardson had offered her a position with his foundation, and she had become one of his most valuable team members. Her life experience and natural empathy made her exceptionally skilled at identifying deserving students and understanding their families' needs. Rose had helped establish scholarship programs in 3 different school districts, and her Sunday morning volunteer work at the food bank had expanded into a comprehensive community support program. She often said that Mr. Richardson hadn't just changed David's life, he had given her a new purpose in her golden years. After graduation, David accepted a position with Richardson Industries, but not because of his connection to Mr. Richardson. He had interviewed with the company's engineering division without revealing his relationship to the CEO, and had been hired based on his credentials and performance in the interviews. Mr. Richardson had insisted on this approach. "I want you to succeed on your own merits," he had told David. "When you walk into that office, I want you to know that you earned your place there." David's first project was a bridge renovation in the same neighborhood where he had grown up. Standing on the construction site, looking at the Maple Grove apartments where he and his grandmother had lived, David felt the full circle of his journey. He was literally building bridges in his own community. But David's most ambitious project wasn't made of steel and concrete. It was the expansion of the Building Bridges program. With Mr. Richardson's support and his grandmother's guidance, David had developed a comprehensive approach to helping young people succeed. The program provided tutoring, mentorship, and college preparation for students from low-income families. But it also offered something unique: hands-on engineering and construction experiences. Students learned about architecture and engineering by building actual projects in their communities. Playground equipment for elementary schools, wheelchair ramps for community centers, and small bridges for local parks. The best way to learn about engineering, David often told his students, is to build something that makes your community better. 3 years after graduation, David was promoted to project manager at Richardson Industries. His combination of technical skills and leadership abilities had made him one of the company's rising stars. More importantly, he had brought a new perspective to the company's community involvement efforts. Under David's guidance, Richardson Industries began partnering with local schools to provide real-world learning experiences for students interested in engineering and construction. High school students could now participate in actual construction projects, learning valuable skills while contributing to meaningful work. Mr. Richardson often marveled at how David had transformed not just his own life, but the entire culture of the company. "You've reminded us what business should really be about," he told David. "Making money is important, but using that success to create opportunities for others, that's what gives work real meaning." The relationship between David and Mr. Richardson had grown into something neither had expected. Mr. Richardson had become like a second grandfather to David, while David had filled a void in Mr. Richardson's life that he hadn't fully understood existed. Mr. Richardson's own son, Michael, had begun to change as well, inspired by David's example and his father's renewed sense of purpose. On David's 24th birthday, Mr. Richardson made an announcement that surprised everyone, including David. He was restructuring his will to leave a significant portion of his estate to the David Chen Educational Foundation, which would continue the scholarship work they had started together. "This foundation represents everything I believe in," Mr. Richardson said at the birthday celebration. "It invests in character as much as academic ability. It recognizes that true success means lifting others up, and it ensures that one act of kindness on a rainy night will continue to change lives for generations to come. The foundation had already provided full scholarships to 47 students. Each recipient was required to maintain high academic standards and demonstrate strong character, just as David had done. But more importantly, each was expected to eventually become a mentor and supporter for future students. David often visited these scholarship recipients, sharing his own story, and encouraging them to think about how they would use their success. "This scholarship isn't just about your education," he would tell them. "It's about the responsibility that comes with opportunity. Someday you'll have the chance to change someone else's life. Start thinking now about how you want to do that." By age 25, David had become a community leader in his own right. He served on the school board, volunteered with youth programs, and spoke regularly at high schools about the importance of education and character. His message was always the same. Success is measured not by what you achieve for yourself, but by what you make possible for others. The Building Bridges program had grown to serve over 300 students annually across 5 school districts. The program had a remarkable success rate. 92% of participants graduated from high school, and 87% went on to pursue higher education. But the statistics that made David proudest were different ones. 43 program alumni had started their own community service projects. 17 had established scholarship funds for other students. 26 had become teachers or youth mentors themselves. "This is how real change happens," David explained to a group of business leaders at a community fundraising event. "You invest in one person, but that person goes on to invest in many others. It's not just multiplication, it's transformation." Mr. Richardson, now 72, often reflected on how much his life had changed since that rainy evening on Highway 85. He had always been successful in business, but David had taught him what success really meant. It wasn't about accumulating wealth or achieving recognition. It was about using whatever advantages you had to create opportunities for others. The two men had developed a tradition of driving together to the annual scholarship award ceremony. During these drives, they would talk about the new recipients, discuss the foundation's plans, and reflect on how much had changed since their first meeting. "You know," Mr. Richardson said during one of these drives, "I used to think I was helping you, but looking back, I think you saved me." "How do you figure?" David asked. "I had everything money could buy, but I had lost sight of what really mattered. You reminded me that the best investment isn't in stocks or real estate. It's in people. You showed me that success without purpose is just accumulation." David smiled. "Grandma Rose always says that we find what we need when we're ready to receive it. Maybe we both found what we needed that night." As they pulled into the parking lot of Roosevelt Middle School, where the scholarship ceremony would be held, both men felt the weight of their shared journey. In the auditorium where David had once been a nervous 7th grader, they would now present opportunities to a new generation of deserving students. The ceremony was attended by past scholarship recipients, their families, community leaders, and the newest group of award winners. David had insisted that all the previous recipients be invited back each year, creating a growing network of young people who shared a commitment to excellence and service. As Mr. Richardson presented the awards, he looked out at the faces in the audience, young people whose lives were about to change dramatically, just as David's had years earlier. But he also saw the faces of the program alumni, now college students and young professionals, all of whom carried forward the values that David had exemplified from the very beginning. The final award of the evening was always presented by David himself. This year's recipient was a 13-year-old girl named Angela Torres, whose teacher had described her as having the same combination of intelligence, character, and heart that makes great leaders. As David handed Angela her certificate, he remembered his own feelings on that afternoon when Mr. Richardson had first walked into Principal Jackson's office. The mixture of disbelief, gratitude, and overwhelming responsibility. "Angela," David said, "this scholarship is going to change your life. But more importantly, I hope it will inspire you to change other people's lives too. That's how we honor the gifts we receive, by making sure others receive them as well." Later that evening, after the ceremony had ended and the families had gone home, David and Mr. Richardson sat in the empty auditorium talking about the future. The foundation now had an endowment that would continue their work indefinitely. The Building Bridges program was being replicated in other cities. Most importantly, They had created a model that showed how individual acts of kindness could become movements of lasting change. What would you tell that 12-year-old boy who stopped to help a stranger on Highway 85? Mr. Richardson asked. David thought for a long moment. I'd tell him that the small things matter just as much as the big things. That helping someone change a tire in the rain can change the entire world if you let it. And I'd tell him that the best part of success isn't what you get, it's what you're able to give. As they turned off the lights and locked up the school, both men knew that their story was far from over. Somewhere in the city, 47 young people were working toward their dreams with the support of the foundation. Hundreds more were building confidence and skills through the Building Bridges program. And countless others were being touched by the ripple effects of kindness and opportunity. The rainy evening on Highway 85 had ended long ago, but its impact would continue for generations. One young man's simple act of helping a stranger had become a legacy of transformed lives, proving that sometimes the most important moments are the ones that seem ordinary at the time. David often thought about his mother's words. Hard times don't last, but strong people do. She had been right. But David had learned something else over the years. Strong people don't just endure, they lift others up. And that, he had discovered, was the real secret to a life well lived.